Hi, my name is Joe Swanson, and I'm a co-founder and lead developer at DataForge. Today I'm going to be walking through a data transformation example to kind of build up a BI data model using a more traditional ETL platform called Coalesce. And the goal of this is to show the stages necessary while building in a traditional ETL platform and some of the decision points around them. In part two of this video, we'll show how DataForge helps simplify some of these decisions and transformations needed and reduce overall the amount of stages to build up your data model to report off of. So with all that being said, let's get going. So let's start with our example data set. So we've mocked up some data simulating kind of a closed suppliers orders data model. So our kind of lowest grain, our orders that we care about is invoice detail. And invoice detail comes with a header record of invoice. And then we also have some information about the invoice details, such as deliveries. We have delivery details, we have customer information, we have item information, we have delivery driver information, which is this man table. And one thing to note is that most of these tables were loaded with little disconnection there. Most of these tables were loaded with Fivetran from a Postgres database. So customer, man, delivery detail, public, and public delivery and public item. But invoice and invoice detail were actually loaded in through CSVs. So that kind of brings us to our very first decision is we want to get some types on invoice and invoice details. So we'll need to make a staging table for each of those and actually assign them some types. So we can make it easier to use later on down in the data flow. But this is a decision point. If these tables are actually full of strings, or if the downstream data set doesn't mind just using casts and things like that in transformations, that can also be the case. But we feel like usually you want to kind of start with your base tables all having their proper data type set. So let's move into the Coalesce platform and get those types set. So we'll go over to Coalesce and we'll see that we have our invoice source set up and our invoice detail source set up. And all of our types in here are strings. So what we want to do first is we want to create a couple stages to type these sources out. And so what we'll do is just right click on one of the sources, add a node, create a stage node. I called these just typed. So as an example, invoice detail typed. And in here, we just change the data types to what we care about. So most of these are going to be integers. We have a couple decimals, and they're all in their snowflakes type because we are going to then, once we have our types set up, we're going to just use Coalesce to select, make sure that our types work. So we can see the data in here. If we click fetch data, just scroll through, make sure nothing is null. Yep, looks all correct. So our types are looking good. Then we'll create the table. So this will create a table in Snowflake, and then we can run this to populate the data. So what we've done here is then materialized this stage for use later on in the pipelines. So that's our first decision point. Do we keep the data raw or do we create a type stage? If we keep the raw landing data, then any non-string data type will need casting down the line for numeric calculations. And every cast down the line, whether it be a timestamp or an object type or anything or a numeric type, also has a chance to break. And with that chance to break, that means developers have to worry about that. They have to worry about values going nulled out. They have to worry about their pipelines breaking. If we create a type stage, then we keep our types figured out closest to the raw data. We can add validation handling off that stage for types that don't cast correctly. And we can decide if we want to materialize that stage and just create a table with the data types. So developers can just query the raw data, or other pipelines or stages can be built off that table to keep adding on to the data warehouse pipelines. Our next goal is to get customer information on the grain of invoice detail. So right now our customer information is actually sitting on the grain of delivery detail, which is connected to delivery from a many to one. Invoice detail is also connected to delivery through a many to one. So we have this scenario where we can't go directly to invoice detail from a delivery detail without having to do some aggregations. So what we want to do is just do a nice group stage for delivery detail where we get a delivery number and a customer number grouped together. So what we'll do is we'll go over to Coalesce. We will go to our delivery detail source here, and we'll add a stage. and this delivery detail will create this delivery detail group stage. And so what we can do is we can just group by the columns we care about. So in this case, it's delivery number, customer number, and we're gonna actually make a decision here, and we can pull customer name onto here by left joining in this stage. We also could, because we'll have the customer number joined into invoice detail later, we could make the join on our invoice detail record later on. So that's a decision point there. And basically just kind of, if you materialize this, you probably would want the join here, so you wouldn't have to do the join on the larger table, which is invoice detail. But if you're not materializing this, you may want the join on invoice detail. But yeah, so once we have this, then we can just pull our columns, delivery number, and customer name. And you can see that we have them all grouped up now nicely so that when we join delivery number, which is on invoice detail, to this table, we can just pull a single customer number. That brings us to our next decision point summary for group stage for customer number. So you could use a CTE to group up the customer number on invoice detail to do it in one shot. So you could use that, go use the CTE just directly on invoice detail to avoid a stage. But in this case, we decided to create a group stage. So it's useful if other stages are joining to this that need that customer number on the same grain as delivery number. It keeps some CTE logic out of the tool, and we can decide to materialize that so other pipelines can use it later. Now that we have customer name on our invoice detail record, the last thing we want to do is we notice that item, item 2, item 3 seem to be basically items pivoted, so that one order detail record actually has 1 to 3 items on it. And especially if we look at the data, we can see here that we don't always have we always have an item 1, but we don't always have an item 2, and we don't always have an item 3. So just having those 3 items spread across one record makes it a little tricky to perform some aggregation calculations, and we really just want to have a reporting table in the context of just a single item. So we just want to break this out and basically unpivot this table. So what we're going to do here is we're actually going to create 3 new stages. Each one of them will just have the context of item, quantity, and size. And we'll just assign the item 1 to the first stage, item 2 to the second stage, item 3 to the third stage. And then we will join all 3 of those, union all 3 of those together into a final stage that we can then have the grain be the context of just a single item, no matter if it's item 1, 2, or 3. Yeah, and in our decision point 3, we've decided to unpivot the data into 3 stages for each item. We probably wouldn't materialize this. We would just have it kind of pass through as virtual because we don't really need the individual data saved in our data lake or our data warehouse. Our final stage would be a multi-source node where we just kind of union them together. That we would want to materialize. That's kind of our reporting table that users will start connecting to. And then this could be done without the stages. You could make 3 CTEs plus a union of them. In Coalesce tool, we can't do that. It needs this multi-source node to do the unioning. And yeah. So in summary, we've ended up making 3 big stage decisions. We've created a type stage to get our data typed at an early point and materialize it for future pipeline development. We've made that group stage for customer num. We've aggregated the data to get it in that single customer num grain. And we decided to join customer name in the stage and materialize it instead of having to do the join to customer name after we bring the customer num into invoice detail. And we did our unpivot and union to change our invoice detail grain from multiple items per invoice record to our item grain. And we materialized that final table in Snowflake so we could run queries on it, or we could hook it up to a reporting tool. And so if we go over to Coalesce then, we can see our final flow built out with our invoice detail typed. We have our kind of 3 unpivots, and we have our final items unpivot. So this could be broken down into a lot less stages by utilizing things like CTEs to cut out these unpivot parts where you build the 3 CTEs like we talked about and just pull that directly into invoice detail. And getting rid of the type tables and doing casting on all of your joins and things like that could also remove that stage here. So what's really important here is to remember that traditional stage ETL design is very fluid and flexible. And what I've just demoed in this previous example is not the only way to build out this data model. In part two, we'll show you how to build out a similar solution in DataForge and show how we've kind of streamlined some of these decisions to make developing a data model like this more repeatable, more reusable, and overall just cleaner and more simple. So really appreciate you checking this video out, and stay tuned for part two.